Alright, so in the last video, we ended up making a pretty cool drum loop, and before we move on to talk about file management, I just want to edit this drum loop a little bit. I was listening to it, and I think that where this second bar starts, I think that should be the start, and then the first bar should be at the end. So basically, these two sections should switch places. I'm going to go ahead and drag this one out of the loop, and then we'll highlight all of these, drag it to the start of the second bar, come back for the rest of our clips, and drag them to the start. And let's give this a listen now. Alright, I think that flows a little bit better. Anyway, in today's video, we are going to be talking about file management. So in the last video, I showed you the Ableton Live project that was automatically created. Here we have our Practical Live 11 set, which is the set we're working in now, and then a folder called Ableton Project Info, which just stores some information related to the project. So we can go ahead and close that now, and if we take a look at the top bar here, we can see that Practical Live 11, this represents the name of the set that we're currently working in, and then within brackets we also have the same name, Practical Live 11, and that represents the project. So because we didn't save it into an existing project, the project was given the same name as the set. And you can see we have a little asterisk here. If we were to hit Control S to save the project, the asterisk will go away. So that just tells us that the set has some changes that have not been saved currently. So just to review projects and sets, I told you to think of projects like some kind of album, and then the sets within them are going to relate to the songs. And you'll see now we actually have a new folder called backup since we just saved our set. And the backup folder allows us to store up to 10 backup set files related to the current set. So for each set that you save in this project, you can have 10 backup sets ready to go. And basically this makes it so that after we save a project or a set, we can actually hit Control Z and keep on undoing any changes that we have, even if we have saved the set. And back in Live 10, this was not an option. If you saved a set, then your undos were gone. You could no longer undo past the point in which you saved. So if you save the project enough, you can expect to see this backup folder appear. And so sets within the same project can actually access each other's files. So if we come back into Ableton and just to review, we have the current project folder, and here you can see Practical Live 11 as well as our backup folders. This will give us access to the sets that we have backed up. And the same thing, we can access all the clips, and say we were to drag this triangle perk track down to a new track, you can see it's the same exact thing as we already had. So it's really important that you strategically place your live sets within projects of other live sets that are going to be working together, because a lot of the times you're going to want to access files and mix and arrange them in different ways. So it's just something that we need to keep in mind. Now, although our live set is saved, we can hit the save button, our asterisk is gone, there is a big problem with this live set right now, and it actually has to do with file references. So right now, this hi-hat, this bongo, this hi-hat, this kick, all of these clips are referencing files that are on my desktop. See, remember, we added this sample sack folder from our desktop into Ableton Live, and that's what we actually have right here. Now when we imported them into the project, we're simply importing a reference from our desktop. So these clips right here are not in the current project. It may seem like they are, but there's actually a big problem with this. And so let me demonstrate exactly what can happen. So we're going to go ahead and close this set, and we're going to come into the sample sack folder, and what I'm going to do, the only thing I'm going to do is rename this snare, and we'll call this snare 2. We'll enter that in, and then let's go ahead and navigate back into our Practical Live 11 set and see if we caused any damage. Alright, so just as I expected, if you take a look at this snare track now, you can see we actually have a sample offline, and Live is no longer able to play that back. We actually broke the connection to our snare drum. So you can see just how big of a problem this could be if you're renaming samples in your library and you don't have these samples actually saved into the project, which I'll show you how to do. Then you're going to have a lot of missing file problems. Now you can replicate this problem if you move a file out of a folder where Ableton is referencing it from, or if you rename. We chose to rename to demonstrate this problem, and you can see we have an orange bar. If I were to select this sample and click down here, you can see it says media files are missing. Please click here to learn more. So if I click this, we're going to open something called the File Manager. So we're going to go ahead and close this for now, and I'm going to show you how to open the base File Manager. So we can come up here to File and then select Manage Files, and this is going to open the base of the File Manager. You can see here we have options to manage the set, which is this current Practical Live 11 Ableton Live set right here. It's what we're currently working in. We have a drum loop inside this set. We can choose to manage the project, which remember is the bigger picture. We have this Ableton Live set saved within a project. Or we can choose to manage the user library, which is just a folder that you keep on your computer to store things that you're going to want to use later, such as presets, samples, basically any resource in Ableton Live. You can save that to your user library. And here in the File Manager, we have options to manage all three of these different file structures. So in order to repair our actual files right here and get our snare drum back and working, we're going to go ahead and come in to manage the set. Now, if you can see here, we can view and replace files, and this is actually where we are going to want to go when we do end up repairing our files. It basically shows you a list of all the files used in the current set, and it allows you to do some pretty cool things such as hot swap and even locate these files within the browser. So we'll come back to that. Next option, we have missing files, which is kind of going to be the same thing. It's going to prompt us to either automatically search for these files or navigate to them within our browser in order to repair this missing files problem. And last but not least, we have external files, and this is kind of what we were talking about. The external files means that Live is referencing these files from a different folder on my computer. Right now, like I said, this sample sack folder, this is on the desktop. So we're referencing files from the desktop, and they're external right now because they are not saved into a project. Now, easily we can hit collect into project, and then we can come down here to collect and save, and that's a really good practice, but I'm going to show you an easier way to do this at a later time. For now, let's actually locate these missing files and make some repairs. So right now it's showing us that our only missing file is this snare drum, and you can see all the different references that it has here. You can see as we select this, we're kind of navigating through the Live set and selecting different snares. So this is all the times we use the snare in the set currently, and this is the main sample. So it's a duplicated sample used 1, 2, 3, 4 times, which sounds about right. If we look at our set here, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and they're all missing, so we only need to find one. Now, like I said, we can automatically search, which is probably the easiest, or we can manually search, and I'm going to show you how to do both. If we wanted to automatically search, we would set up a folder. So here we would select a folder. We know that it's going to be in the sample sack place, so we'll select that folder, and then we can also choose to search the project, search the user library or the Live library, and we'll hit go. So there were 12 new candidates found actually, so Live doesn't really know what to do, and you can see this magnifying glass here turned into a question mark. If we select that question mark, our browser over here is going to give us a bunch of different options for what we might want. We can listen to them. It sounds like Live pulled a lot of these out of the library, and so it's not very accurate. And so, in my opinion, manually search is going to work a lot better. So we're going to hit this button, and that's going to put us in hot swap mode. You can see here in the browser it says hot swap mode. We are going to go back to our sample sack folder. This is our snare drum. We're going to go ahead and double click, and now our snare drum has been repaired. We can go ahead and hit the X to exit out of the hot swap mode, and now if we listen back to our set, our snare drum is fixed. So it's really as simple as that. A lot of the time when I pull up the file manager, people kind of just freak out because it's a little intimidating, but it's very powerful and very useful, and it can solve a lot of issues very quickly. Now, in addition to simply repairing files, something that we can do is actually hot swap our files. So you saw before that when I hit this button, we can come into the browser and we can pretty much just look around until we find, let's replace this snare, and I'll just show you how easy it is. Okay, so let's replace our current snare with this Tupac snare. So I'm currently in hot swap mode from the file manager. I find the file that I want to be replaced with inside of my browser. I'm going to double click. And now if we play back our set, you can see we just switched all the references in one go. So instead of dragging and dropping and replacing files here, it's really quick and simple to do it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and revert back to our original sample, this snare 2 here. And a lot of the time, something that I like to do is make a drum loop like this and then spend some time in the file manager just messing around with my file references. So if we come back here to the home, we're going to hit manage set again, and now there are no missing files, so we can close that option. We still have external files because although we've repaired the reference, it's still just a reference. So let's go ahead and view all files. So this is exactly like what we just saw. However, it's showing us all files that are currently used. You can see we only have one instance of this bongo perk. Same, one instance. We have a ton of instances of these closed hi-hats, so it's going to show us all those. We have our hot swap button, so we can switch any of these samples with any resource that we have in our browser. And additionally, we have this little edit button here. Now, this edit button is actually going to launch an external sample editor. So if you don't have one set up in your preferences, then this edit button is kind of useless. It will do nothing. But if you do, great. You can go ahead and simply click this button to access your sample editor and make changes there. Now we have the name of our files and then the location. We've already talked about this as being an external file, and that Live really doesn't like to work with external files. So let me show you how to collect and save all the files into the actual project. So the easiest way to do this is we'll close the file manager for now. We'll come to File, Collect All, and Save. Now, before we actually do this, I want to remind you of our project structure. So here we have our project on the desktop, the Practical Live 11 project. And if we click in here, again, we have our backups folder. We have another backup because we saved again. And then Ableton project info. Okay, here's our live set. But now when I come here and hit Collect All and Save, we're going to have some options. Files from elsewhere, definitely. Files from other projects, yes. Files from the user library, I might as well, and files from factory packs. Now, I like to select all these files because a lot of the times I pack up my projects and then send them off, and I want whoever receiving my project to have all the files that they need. So I always choose yes to all of these. You can make that decision for yourself. For instance, if you only use one studio setting, then you're not really going to want to use factory packs because they're already going to be installed in your library, and Live will be able to reference them pretty easily. Anyway, we're going to hit OK here, and we're going to come back to our file folder, and look at this. We have a new folder called Samples, and this literally has our imported samples, and this is our sample pack that we're using. Okay, so literally it takes the samples, puts them in the project so that I can reference them from here instead of grabbing them off the desktop. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and go back to our file manager, and we can manage our set. And you can see this live set does not use any external files because we just collected them and saved. So now that we've managed our set, let's go ahead and take a look at managing a project. So when you're managing a project, you can see you have several more options. So here we have the project location, and it shows us that this project resides on the desktop. Next, we have the project contents, which tells us a little bit about what's actually inside of the project itself. Here we have 4 live sets, and that might surprise you because, hey, we've only saved this Practical Live 11 set in there, but you've got to remember that we have the backup sets. So we have 3 backup sets and 1 main set for a total of 4 live sets. Currently, we have no live clips used in the project because we're just not using any. We're only using samples. We haven't saved anything to our user library, etc. Here we have 0 preset files because, again, we're just using samples. Ableton doesn't need to store all this information if we're not using it. However, here on media files, these are our 6 samples. You can see here we have 6 tracks using 1 sample each. That's going to give us the 6 media files that we have in this project. And if you have any defects in your project, those are going to be shown here as well. Now let's move on to missing files. The same thing for the sets is going to be here in the missing files. However, you're going to be able to repair and replace any files within any sets within the project. So this is just a much bigger view of what you've got here. Here, our last thing was this missing snare, and we'll just go ahead and go back. So this is another way to repair missing files, except it spans across all the sets within a project. Next, we have external files. Again, this is just a way to collect all and save. So we're going to go ahead and select to collect that into the project. We'll hit collect all and save, and our changes were saved successfully. Now let's go back into managing our project where we were, and here we can see unused files, and unused files gets a bit tricky because currently we're in this project, and if we were to load up a file, save those files into the project by collecting and saving, and then we were to delete that file at a later time, maybe it's a sample that we're not going to use, those files would still be within the project taking up space. So here, if you have those files, it would actually give you an option to clean up the set and delete these unused files. Now last but certainly not least, we have packing, which in my opinion is one of the most powerful features of Ableton Live. It lets you collaborate with users around the world very quickly and very cleanly. Basically, we can create a pack out of this project, and it will basically compress the project without losing any audio quality or anything like that. It will compress the project, and then we can send this compressed file off to another person that uses Ableton. They can open it, which will uncompress the file and give them the same exact project that we're looking at here. Now, you've got to remember to collect all and save every time before you do this. Otherwise, you're going to be sending them a project with missing files, and let me tell you, there is nothing more frustrating. So be a good steward of your files and know what you're sending off to collaboration. So now that we've taken a look at managing your set and managing your project, let's lastly look at the user library. Now, when we're talking about the user library, it's going to be displayed in the file manager in the same way as a project is. So it's going to have a little bit of problems because of that, especially when it tells you about any unused files, but we'll talk about that. For now, let's kind of look at the structure that we're working with here. So here we are in the user library management system, and you can see it's exactly like an actual project. Here we have the location. You can see we have this on my D drive under a folder called PC Ableton. And next up, we can see the contents. So currently, I guess we have 8 live sets within our user library somewhere. Not really sure how that's working. We have 47 live clips, which means these are all the clips that we've saved into our user library. A ton of preset files that we've saved, and a bunch of samples. You can see here 2.7 gigabytes. No defects currently, but that's fine. And next up, we have missing files. There are no missing files. Now, next up, we have external files, and right here it says all of the files used by the user library are contained within it. So we don't really have any external files, although we do have some references to some factory packs. So we can choose to collect these into the library, but I'm just going to leave it for now since I don't really think we'll be missing that. Now we come to the unused files, and this is a pretty big problem in Ableton Live right now. So you can see here we have 2.1 gigabytes of unused files. Now you've got to remember that this is the user library, so it makes sense that we're going to have a lot of unused files. I'm not storing all of my Ableton Live sets inside my user library. Instead, I'm taking the clips used in the user library and putting them in different projects. So we've really got to be careful if we decide to clean these up. So we can show these and we have the option to delete them. But if I delete these from right here and I'm using them in another project, I would never know until I go to open up that other project. So it's pretty dangerous. What you've got to do before you ever clean up anything in your sample library is go through every single Ableton Live set you've ever used, or every single project would actually be a quicker way, and to collect all the files being used in there and save them. Now, of course, this is going to make those project files really big and bulky. You're going to have to save a lot of gigabytes of samples in there, but I'm telling you, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be so worth it, because nothing is more frustrating than opening up a live set thinking you're ready to work on this awesome song or project that you've been working on, and then having missing files and having to spend hours searching through your sample library until you find the right samples to replace your old missing ones. So it's really important to know that when your user library says it has unused files, it's probably lying to you. So you've really got to be careful with this. Look here, if we choose to show these 2.1 gigabytes of samples, I know for a fact some of these have been used in other productions. This Chop Drums Tom 1, I'm almost positive that I'm using this in another project that I'm working on. But if I were to take the user library for its word, these are just unused files that need to be deleted. So I can't stress enough how important it is to distinguish what files are being used where before you start renaming, deleting, or moving any files in your user library, your sample library, just wherever. If you use these files, Ableton is probably referencing them. And so that is file management in Ableton. It is one of the most important aspects of Live, in my opinion, because if you're having missing media files, you aren't making music, you know? So let's just go ahead and collect all and save. I'll do this probably every time I'm in a project. For every session, I at least collect and save one time. Now, you don't need to worry, because as you can see, I've collected and saved multiple times. However, we only have one set of our samples, so they're not going to be duplicated and collected and saved a bunch of times. And just to prove this, we'll go ahead and hit collect all and save once more, hit OK, come back to our files, samples imported, and you'll see we still have only those 6 files that we've been working with this entire time. So really, there's no downside to collecting and saving, but there is many upsides. So just do it as many times as you feel comfortable. So now that you have the file management system down, feel free to switch out some of those samples if you're not feeling maybe the hi-hats or anything. Really just play around with the file manager, get comfortable with replacing and repairing missing files, and your Ableton Live career will flourish because of it. Now, in the next video, we'll be taking a look at some of Ableton Live's native devices and kind of how they fit into the workflow, how you can use them to achieve some really great results. So look forward to that. And for now, remember, collect all and save.